And thank you everyone for joining our monthly Minority Business Development Agency Partners Collaboration Training Series. My name is Sharonetta McIntyre, and I serve as the Business Development and Marketing Manager with the Hub Office and with the NC MBDA Business Centers. And so we're so glad to host on today Cyber Alliance to do the Cybersecurity and Small Business Contracting webinar for us today. And so to give an official welcome on behalf of our Hub Office Executive Director, Tammy Hall, and our Deputy Director, Alicia Lyon, you are all welcomed to this session on today. They both send their hearty welcome to all the presenters and to all the firms and our resource partners that have joined us on today. They certainly understand the importance of ensuring that businesses know about the different resources that are available to support you. And so certainly cybersecurity is one of those topics as an ongoing topic and has the ability to cause devastating impacts and ultimately impact your bottom line. So we are so happy to have Cyber Alliance with us on today in order to help you be better prepared to mitigate risk and to continue to position your business for success. And so with that, I'd first like to introduce Catherine Lucas. Catherine is our new MBDA Business Center Program Manager. And so Catherine, please give us a quick intro.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. McIntyre. Good morning, everyone. I am indeed excited to be joining such a wonderful organization. But I tell you what I'm really excited about, and that is seeing each and every one of you here. It is because of our partners, firms, my colleagues, everyone here that's on this call that makes it possible for us to do the work that we do. I am excited about the presentation today because it is definitely something that impacts our economy globally. So I am not going to stand in the way of that, and I will turn it back over now into the hands of Ms. McIntyre so that we can proceed with our agenda as written. Thank you once again, and look forward to meeting some of you hopefully soon in person.
Thank you, Catherine. And so with that, next up, I'm going to ask Annette Stevenson, who actually coordinated our session on today, to introduce Larry, who is the president of Cyber Alliance, and also Kendrell, that is the CEO. So we're so glad again to have you with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it to Annette Steven, and she'll turn the program then to Cyber Alliance for our training today.
Thank you, Shay. Thank you, Catherine. Welcome, everybody. I'm also excited about the session today. As you may recall, earlier or last year, we had a session. It was an introduction overview on cybersecurity by ISG, Tony Marshall. But this session, we're going to take a deeper dive. So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce to you Cyber Alliance if you haven't heard of them yet. They are a powerhouse in this cyberspace that's really growing. So Kendrell Felder is the CEO and co-founder of Cyber Alliance. He has a strong corporate background coming out of Cisco, deep experience in IT, enterprise operations, cybersecurity, and international business. Larry Young, who is the president and co-founder of Cyber Alliance. And, I need a day to introduce Larry, but needed to say he's a serial entrepreneur. And, I encourage you to go connect with these two gentlemen on LinkedIn. We talk about build your network now before you need it. But Larry's got 20 years of business experience with advising governments, corporations, NGOs, on various issues in the U.S. and in the continent of Africa. So if you are interested in doing business in Africa, this is the gentleman you want to meet. He has a B Direct, a corporate board placement company that focuses on preparing Black executives and entrepreneurs to support African businesses. Again, a lot of opportunity there. And last but not least, he's a partner in the oldest Black-owned global strategy consulting firm in the U.S., BNC International, and has just led a lot of transformational efforts in Africa, creating libraries, a lot of good work, okay? And now this next venture of Cyber Alliance. And they're going to share their expertise today on cybersecurity, because if you're interested in going into federal contracting, corporate contracting, any contracting, this is going to be the next business differentiator for you. Can't say that, right? If you want to make your company stronger and competitive, you are going to be able to speak to these topics in your RFPs, in your outreach, to set the hook to get your customer, because everybody is concerned about their supply chain. Okay, so Kendall and Larry, thank you again for your partnership, and take it away. Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate the introductions there, Annette. Thank you for the platform, sharing that. And Catherine, congratulations to you on the new opportunity. Look forward to working with you all in your various capacities. As said, we'll go ahead and get the presentation kicked off here while I share my screen. 1 second.
And did we say we're going to take questions as you go, or just put the questions in the chat? We'll be monitoring the chat, okay?
Yeah, if we could put the questions in the chat, that would be great. And we have some time set aside at the end of the presentation to make sure we address all the questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Fantastic. As Annette just said to everyone, it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. You know, in addition to the various IT experiences that I've had, proud to say that I do represent the Blue Devils. Was fortunate enough to be able to run fast and jump high, so I played football there as an undergrad. Lost a lot of games, but had a lot of fun. But in the process, also started my career at Duke University as a consultant. So going on about 19 years of overall corporate experience, ranging from business operations, marketing, sales, business development, etc. And so in addition to Larry's vast amount of experiences, when we talk to you all about cybersecurity, we're not just talking from the typical engineer's perspective. We're talking from that perspective as well, but we're also bringing you the tacit knowledge that we bring from running actual businesses, organizations, and helping to scale multinational programs. So we try to wear all the hats when we're speaking to our audiences, because we know typically we don't have cybersecurity experts in the audience. So I wanted to kick it off by mentioning that background. But for today's agenda, we're actually going to cover quite a few topics. As Annette said, last year, Mr. Marshall did a great job of talking about cybersecurity at an overview level. And we'll start there just because of the simple fact that if you ask 10 professionals what cybersecurity means, you probably get 12 different answers, right? And so just grounding the conversation in what cybersecurity means to us. But then also diving into a topic. I
actually really enjoyed sleeping on the loft.
If could you all mute your mic, please, and get some background noise? But also talk to you all about a topic that Larry and I have sort of coined the digital pandemic, and you know we'll get into more of what that means. And so that'll address more of the risks that cybersecurity can present. But then to Annette's point, speak to security as a true differentiator. And then from there, dive into how you actually can get into some of the federal contractor opportunities, what's required from a CMMI perspective, and then how we as Cyber Alliance can help you all navigate that journey, right? And whether we're talking about security from a risk management perspective or from a business enablement perspective, make no mistake about it, it's going to be a journey, just like, you know, your corporate finance is, your marketing is, your legal affairs within your company. There's always going to be more to do, but it's always great to have a strong foundation. So that's how we'll get it kicked off here today. Cyber Alliance at a glance. Larry, you want to walk through the slide to sort of tell the people who we are before we start diving into all the exciting agenda topics?
Absolutely. Thank you for Kendall, and thank you all for joining. This is as we'll kind of discuss today, as we go through the slides. This discussion is a very, very big discussion. It's a very important topic for businesses of all sizes, for governments, for government agencies, and you know, in terms of what COVID-19 has shown us, the interconnectivity with this as being a global conversation. The issue of securing the cyberspace isn't a problem that is siloed or individualized, right? This is a problem that is really affecting us all, affecting the quality of living of us all, affecting our ability to operate, to develop products, to get contracts, to reach customers faster, et cetera. All of the aspects of the promise that technology and innovation provides us. And for Cyber Alliance, our mission and our vision and our values are really tied to making sure that technology lives up to that particular promise. And for our vision, we want to be recognized as the cybersecurity platform that global corporations, small businesses, and public sector companies utilize to establish global cyber trust. In this world of connectivity, where we're all either working remotely, we are utilizing our phones and various different endpoints for communication. We want to make sure that there's a certain level of trust that is established and being able to be shown between us all. And our mission is, and I know Kendra mentioned some of our work, and Annette mentioned some of our work on the continent of Africa, but we want to make sure with our mission that we're able to help the United States and the continent of Africa really secure that promise that I just mentioned. And from a perspective of values, where trust is very important for us, transparency, inclusion, and accountability and growth are also essential for how we deploy our products, how we carry out our business model. Cybersecurity and technology, where technology in general has the opportunity to be a great progressor and advancer, if you will, of business. It also is an opportunity, if there aren't enough skills and not enough information and not enough accessibility and affordability as it relates to technology, it also creates an opportunity for technology to be a great divider. And we want to make sure with Cyber Alliance that our efforts are really focused on making sure that technology and cybersecurity information and cybersecurity solutions are affordable and accessible to all. So thank you, Kendra.
I appreciate that, Larry. So diving into what is cybersecurity, and I know it's a lot going on in the screen, but I'll try to simplify it. But starting with the definition, and the operative word in this entire thing is cybersecurity is actually an art, because it varies from organization to organization, company to company, and even a lot of times from individual to individual. And so it's really the art of protecting your networks, your various devices and data through the people, processes, and technology from unauthorized access or criminal use, right? And those are all the things that we see on TV today, whether it be ransomware, malware, et cetera, et cetera. And the main objective of cybersecurity is to ensure that there's CIA as it relates to information, and not the three-letter agency CIA, is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If your information is supposed to be secret, it should stay that way from a confidentiality standpoint. The data that you have stored should be what you expected it to be from an integrity perspective, and shouldn't be changed or modified in a way that could be detrimental to the organization. And you need it when you need it, right? At the end of the day, if you need to access your financial system as you're going through an RFP process, and for some reason it's been locked down, that's detrimental to your business operation. And so cybersecurity is truly the art of protecting all those different facets of your business from a digitized perspective. What you see here from an imagery perspective is really a representation of how nuanced cybersecurity can be at large organizations, but also how you can pull several of these different items from this screen here and apply them to your small or medium-sized businesses, right? As Larry said, this isn't a big company issue. This is a every company issue. And one of our cybersecurity mentors gave us a good quote. He said that when companies ask him what type of customer he's looking for, he said ones that want to be in business in 2 years. And that's a real thing from the perspective of, if you have a successful multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar organization and you aren't taking cybersecurity seriously, you probably won't be around in 2 or 3 years, or you won't be in the same shape that you are now in 2 or 3 years, because someone will target you because of your success. And so really what we try to do is up-level the conversation that you see on the screen here, to get people to understand that there's a strategic aspect to cybersecurity. There's a technical aspect as well, but then there's a technical component and there's operational. And you, as the business owner, don't need to necessarily be an expert in either of those categories, but you need to know what the language is, if you will, to be able to work with organizations like Cyber Alliance to ensure that your business can stay online. And so that's really our perspective on cybersecurity, but we'll dive deeper here. And with that, we'll dive into this notion of the digital pandemic that we've witnessed, observed, and been able to navigate through with several customers, both on the continent of Africa and here in the United States. So with that, I'd ask Larry to take the reins on explaining the digital pandemic aspect of where we are, and sort of give some tangible examples. So Larry, I'll control the slides while you kick it off here.
Thank you, Kendra. So the term digital pandemic, right? We recognize that the word pandemic itself is a word that we've all developed a certain sensitivity to, based on COVID-19. But what COVID really taught us all in terms of the idea and the aspect and the impact of a global pandemic is that, at a small level, how much our individual quality of life was impacted, from that health-induced pandemic. And you didn't really notice it until, and obviously there's big conversations about global supply chains, et cetera, but you really don't, it really hits home when you start to notice that, your favorite barbershop or your favorite restaurant or your favorite accountant, you couldn't see them face to face, right? Or they were no longer in business. So when we think about the impacts of the health-induced pandemic that we all, that we've survived, so to speak, at this point, we think about that and relate it to a digital pandemic, because in reality, 43% of all cyber attacks are focused on small businesses, and only 14% of them are prepared to defend themselves. Now, if and the data as the bottom left box, 60% of SMEs will close within 6 months of a breach, and you wonder why that is, because as we'll talk about later on, we see breaches happen all the time with some of the biggest brands in the world, but as a big brand, those brands typically have the ability to remain operational. They typically don't lose customers from a cyber breach. However, if you look at the impact and relate it to a small business who can't survive either financially from, say, a ransomware, they have trouble reputationally surviving a cyber breach, because if you're a small business and it becomes public knowledge that you have had this type of occurrence, then customers are just going to have the option of choosing another business, whether they be small or large. And then operationally, many of our businesses will have a hard time recovering from the operational loss. What we've seen from a perspective of entrepreneurship, the pandemic caused a great impact on the initiation and the incorporation of small businesses. And those small businesses are operating in many cases based on, product market fit or passion or urgency to provide solutions. What we want to prevent are these solutions being brought to market without having a certain level of data privacy, a certain level of data protection, a certain level of security in how these products and solutions or services are deployed and developed. Because when you think about large corporations, they are spending millions of dollars per year on developing, to that previous slide that Kendra showed, where all of the varying different components of cybersecurity, they're spending millions of dollars every year to be able to structure those types of cybersecurity strategies. And we're not suggesting that small businesses have the capital, the capacity, or the sophistication to develop those types of internal strategies. But we do want to say that there has to be some level of proactiveness in developing your customized and contextualized cyber strategy, so that you, one, have the ability to protect yourselves and develop a certain level of cyber resiliency, but two, you position yourselves to be able to be in line with the strategies of those corporations that you're trying to win contracts with, or with the federal agencies that you're looking to win contracts with. And as regulations change, so there's a cascading effect of those regulations also being expected to be carried out by small businesses as well. So, again, this supply chain risk, with 43% of all attacks being targeted at small businesses, government agencies, large corporations, supply chains at large are increasingly looking at their vulnerability as it relates to their supply chain, and the things that we're talking about today, and the ongoing work that your businesses will have to engage in, will be positioning you for those opportunities.
So Larry, can I ask you a question on this slide here?
Absolutely.
And I guess specifically, if you could give some examples. So I'm a small business. Why would anybody want to bother me? I understand the Walmarts, twice in 1 year, we get the letter from Walmart. Oh, your account's been compromised. Here's a new card, right? But I'm a small business. Why are you going to bother coming after me? What do I have, that makes you want to reach out to me? I'm not an oil company, right, where you can ransom me for millions of dollars. What is it? Sorry if it's a dumb question. Yeah, just
no, it's an absolutely great question, right? Great. And we've gotten that question before from small businesses. And the first answer that we want to give to that is, they're not coming after you for the money, right? Because if I'm a cyber attacker, I would have much more from a profitability standpoint. Sure, it's easier for me to target Walmart, or more attractive for me to target Walmart than it would be to target a small business. So my interest in targeting a small business isn't from the financial gain of ransoming that particular small business.
Okay.
But what it does open up for me as a cyber attacker is that more than likely you have access to Walmart because you're on their supply chain, right? Or whatever larger corporation or industry that you're a part of. And where it may be difficult for me to, say, directly hack the larger entity, it might be easier for me to get on their platform by way of an employee of your business. And that,
so they're using us as a Trojan horse.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, and that it's almost like you're on the Cyber Alliance team here, because that stat that you see in the bottom right hand corner of the slide here really speaks to the question that you just asked and the answer that Larry gave, right? Supply chains were responsible for 62% of system intrusions in 2021. So that means, some of these breaches that you see through large customers, several of them, per this statistic, aren't necessarily coming from the weakness of the big company. It's coming from the weakness of smaller companies who they procure services and products from. And so it's a fantastic question and point that you raised there. And I'll offer a couple additional perspectives to what Larry said, which was absolutely correct. The other piece, the other answer that you could give someone who says, well, I'm just a small business, very simple operation, we don't have a lot of complex things going on. And the answer to that, quite candidly, can simply be, just because your operation is simple doesn't mean it's not valuable, right? If you think about, accounting firms or wealth management firms or small, family office investment banks or funds or real estate companies that are 2 or 3 person shops, those aren't necessarily what true techies would consider complex environments, but they're extremely valuable if you think about the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars that are sort of circulating through those businesses, whether it be through deals, whether it be through assets under management, or whether it be through their access to wealthy customers or successful companies. And so again, that statement of just because it's simple and small doesn't mean it's not valuable to someone potentially sitting on the other end of a potential breach. And then the last example we can give in terms of that small company saying that they're not, they're not an entity that a hacker would want to breach, is that hacking has become a sophisticated business in itself. They don't necessarily look at every attack as something that they need to exploit immediately. A lot of attackers now play the long game, right? And so they actually have a funnel, right? You think about sales from a business development perspective. You have people at the top of the funnel, and then you have customers that are ready to close. Small businesses are a means for hackers to essentially aggregate, thousands or tens of thousands of businesses at the top of the funnel in a way where if they did want to ransom them at some point in the future, either those companies have grown in terms of their value, or they can go to each one of them and demand maybe a lower ticket than they can get from Walmart, but they have 10,000 tickets that they're going to get from these small businesses. So in addition to what Larry provided as an example, those are 2 others that small businesses should be thinking of. Just because you're simple doesn't mean you're not valuable. And just because you haven't been exploited today doesn't mean an attacker wouldn't want to exploit you along with some others to get a big ticket at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
So I'll flip over to the next slide here. And I'll tee it up, and this really speaks to some of the points that Larry was speaking to earlier. When we think about the digital pandemic and talk about things like this is a shared problem, it isn't a big or a small company problem. It is the digital pandemic is actually heightened by big companies. And I used to work for a big company, love them to death. And many of the brands that you see on this screen here, I'm sure if we were in a in-person setting and we asked, how many of you all are fans of Twitter or Uber or sending cash apps or going to the Marriott, some hands would go up, right? But at the same time, if you look at the impact of the breaches that have occurred within those companies, the reality is either your personal information or your business information has, potentially been a part of these breaches. When you look at the numbers, like 200 million user emails and phone numbers were acquired by a hacker through a breach from Twitter, or from a Marriott perspective, credit card details, passport numbers, birth dates of more than 300 million guests were taken as a part of a breach through simply email phishing for Marriott, right? And so this really calls, this is why we started talking about the digital pandemic, because the big companies sort of impacted, if you will, but now we're all at a greater risk because, we gave our credit card details to Marriott, or we were, customers of the TransUnion credit score and additional services. And now we have to go back and change passwords, change usernames, make sure we reach out to the credit bureaus and, put identity protection on all these different things that we're doing, and essentially do personal cybersecurity exercises in addition to the business cases. And so we use this to highlight the fact that, yes, big companies actually get breached as well and present a very much a risk to your business as a smaller, medium-sized business owner, but then also to you personally, causing you to take additional action. So we wanted to highlight this as a part of that digital pandemic that we talk about, as a means for you as a small business to make sure you're always taking appropriate actions to ensure you're credentials, your access, your certain levels of security are in place, because it's not necessarily about what you do, it's about how others can impact you. But I'll pause there for comments that Larry may have on the slide as well.
Absolutely. I think this is a very good point, a very good point that was made in terms of this slide and the visual of this slide from an additional perspective or context is, as individual businesses, you want to begin to understand what your actual risk profile is. And this type of slide shows you where you might have risks that you didn't necessarily think about, right? You might not know if your credentials, whether they be personal or business, were included in past breaches, right? And if they are, how do you, to Kendra's point, how are you, what means are you going to change passwords, or what means are you going to make sure that you are protected? And to the previous point, you're not a target for a future occurrence based on being in that funnel, right? So I think there are a lot of products and services. We at Cyber Alliance have a number of them as well. That could be able to assist you with being able to understand what your individual risk profile is, and to begin, based on that awareness, start to develop what your strategy is for creating more cyber resiliency within your respective companies.
Great point, Larry. And you know what? I'll finish this slide by referencing our definition of cybersecurity. And in that definition, we called out the fact that cybersecurity is actually people, processes, and technology. A lot of people, when they hear cybersecurity, think, oh, I'll just go get a firewall, or I'll just go get this technology or that technology. And it's not just that, because if you go get that firewall and you don't have the people to actually understand how to use it, then you've wasted money. And if you get a firewall and then you have a person who's capable but doesn't have boundaries in terms of how they should be using it within the processes of your organization, then you're introducing undue risk to the organization by not telling that employee how he or she should or shouldn't be using that technology. So as you can see here on the screen, right, even at the biggest of companies, you see people and process pop up all over this slide in terms of breach type, whether it's an employee with a misconfigured server, or customer credentials compromised, or third-party vulnerability, or email phishing. Those are mostly employee actions that were misses, right? And those companies have things in place, but a lot of times, you have to really ensure that the people within your organization understand explicitly what they should be doing and how they should be using technologies. And then to our point about the digital pandemic, ensuring that you're doing everything you can to ensure you're not getting infected by your employees clicking on email phishing, but also through your third-party vendors. So we'll close the big company slide with that piece, calling out people, process, and technology, and then talk about some statistics from an SMB standpoint. And Larry, if you want to kick this one off, you can give it a go, brother.
As a carry on to the last slide into this one, right? Almost as equally important, and depending upon who you're speaking to, arguably even more important, are those people and process aspects of your business. People and process cybersecurity aspects of your business are equally or is more important than the technologies that you actually use, because to Kendra's point, technology isn't the beginning and the end of what your individual cybersecurity strategies are. One on to the left, there's one that I definitely want to begin to call out is that 82% of ransomware attacks in 2021 were against companies with fewer than 1,000 employees, right? So that goes back to the previous slides that talked about the vulnerability of small businesses to cyber attacks, right? And primarily because attackers know that small businesses typically have blind spots and gaps, whether that be between their people, their process, or the technology aspects of their cybersecurity strategy, right? So again, and it might not be because you are a target just based on the revenue that you have now, but it could be revenue that you're creating in the future. It could be access that you have to other supply chains, and the ransomware, the phishing, emails might be the best way in, right? Employees of small businesses experience 350% more social engineering attacks than those at larger enterprises. Again, it goes to this. It speaks speaks directly to, why you're here today, if you will, in terms of as a follow up to the session that Tony Marshall did, where there was a big discussion around the what and the why. Now we're starting to venturing into kind of the how and the how aspect of protecting yourselves. And then from an aspect of the bottom right, where it says 59% of small business owners with no cybersecurity measures in place believe their business is too small to be attacked, right? That goes to the question that Annette asked, that many small businesses ask in just not understanding the urgency that they need to start to look at the people, process, and technology aspects of their cybersecurity strategy, not understanding that it should be an urgent action because they are being targeted, or potentially being targeted already, or will be targeted in the future. And 51% of small businesses that fall victim to ransomware ultimately end up paying that ransom, right? That and for small businesses, we're in a recession, as the news tells us quite frequently, right? And based on coming off a pandemic where we're newly finding ways to develop products and deploy services and reach new customers. If you think about where we are, or where you are in the business evolution of your company, it's being fallen victim to, this is not the time to fall victim to ransomware, right? Because that hard-earned money that you worked for, that capital that you raised, is very, very important to you, and very important to the continued operation of your business. And no one wants to lose any level of operational income or profitability at this point.
Strong points, Larry. And one I'd like to call out that you've spoken to, but I'm connected to the rest of the slide. The statistic around 59% of small business owners with no measures in place believing their business is too small to be attacked. Whether you want to call it a correlation or a causation, that's the reason for the rest of this slide, right? There would still be attacks if the number were 0% of business owners. But the reality of it is, again, speaking to the sophistication of operations that hackers put into place, they know this statistic. So they know there's a soft underbelly in terms of small businesses being able to gain access to their networks and hold them for ransom, which they know, per the statistic, they're at least going to get 50% of the businesses to pay. But it's also the reason why 82% of the ransomware attacks in 21 were targeted at companies of fewer than 1,000 employees, because the business owners had the mindset of, we aren't big enough, or we aren't complex enough, or we're not this. But in reality, if you're doing well to any degree, your company definitely is at a risk of being breached or targeted. So we put this slide together again to show the other side of the digital pandemic. And these statistics, I think, should really bring that to life for everyone in terms of the continued use of the word pandemic. Because if you think about the reality of 82% of ransomware attacks, right? If 82% of the world's population got COVID, imagine the hysteria that there will be. And so that's the world that we're in right now, the landscape that we're all navigating, that we is inclusive of everyone on this call and all businesses. So we try to make sure we up-level the conversation when we're speaking to business owners to help them understand it's not just about, your business being small or not being this or that. It's the fact that your business is actually operating in a much broader ecosystem that impacts it one way or another, whether you like it or not. And so we use this digital pandemic portion of the presentation to help business owners understand the realities of doing business in an age where most of your business operation is digitized. So with that said, right, we've sort of shown the risk aspect of cybersecurity and why you need to do risk management. We'll shift gears into talking more about how cybersecurity is can be used as a differentiator, right? Can be used as a business enabler, as a vehicle for growth. And so when you look at the federal contracting landscape, in 2021, 27.2% of total federal contract funds were awarded to small businesses, right? And so in order for those small businesses to get those federal contracts, they essentially had to go through the CMMC process that we're going to speak to in a few slides. But those businesses just didn't show up and raise their hand and say, hey, we're interested in your RFP or your contract. They had to contribute real diligence to their internal operations so that they were prepared and had the appropriate infrastructure to be able to pursue those federal contracts. The next point really speaks to the amount of money, right? 154.2 billion. That is a staggering amount of funds that could be going to small businesses. But the interesting piece, and it speaks to the next slide or the next point down as well, is that while the number of dollars are going up, the number of businesses are going down. And so when Larry and I see statistics like that, we ask ourselves, well, what are the key barriers? And after, a bit of research, there are things that, are out of our control, like sort of some of the processes that are involved or some of the bonding requirements for certain contracts. But the one that's very controllable are the cybersecurity requirements, right? Of the three biggest barriers that we found to getting federal contracts, cybersecurity was noted as one of the biggest barriers. And so we want to make sure firms like yours on this call understand that organizations like Cyber Alliance are here to help guide you through that journey of improving your cyber posture and becoming compliant with those CMMC levels, respective of the type of contract that you're pursuing. So I'll pause there for Larry to comment on anything on this slide before I move to the next one.
Right. Yeah. And I'll just put a bow on that because, the cybersecurity conversation is a moving target, right? Regulations are continually changing. The goalpost, as they say, is continuously being moved as it relates to cybersecurity. And as small businesses, in reality, you don't want to spend, really any of your day trying to keep up with new cybersecurity regulations, what that means for your business and what that means for your business growth. But there are resources out there, some of the things that Cyber Alliance provides to be able to make sure that your level of compliance is moving at the same pace of the regulatory changes in the cybersecurity industry, right? There are hundreds of cybersecurity regulations that come out every single year. Now, where those regulations are in terms of forceability, where those regulations are in terms of being barriers to getting contracts, securing contracts, or even maintaining contracts is also a conversation, right? We've had customers who have been federal contractors and suffered breaches, and the adjustments that they had to make post breach were very expensive updates, very expensive people, process, and technology changes to their cybersecurity strategy. So our effort in terms of, and when we go back to our mission as a company, is making sure that that type of information and access and the inclusivity of that type of technology is accessible to all and deployed in a way where you have access to the things that you need in order to have successful businesses, particularly ones that are going after all of the opportunities that are being provided in federal contracting.
Yes. So let me jump in here real quick and add to your pretty bow, Larry. It's because all the things pop up in my mind as you're talking, because what I can also hear is expense. Right, here we go. It's another expense. Being a federal contractor is not cheap, right? um, but what I would say is this is another tool for your toolkit that is a must have. This is not a nice to have, right? This is the aspirin. This is not a vitamin. You must have this if you're going to be successful in growing your business. Okay. Again, off the table is the small business to consumer. I mean, that has its own risks with the financials. But if you are serious about scaling your business and getting into federal contracting or getting to do business with the state or corporate America, cybersecurity needs to be a part of your company's landscape and conversation, every day, every week, because it like the stats show, it will take you down. There was a question from SK about, you have a 2010 stat. Is there a more recent stat? And yes, there are some more recent stats. And to again echo what Larry shared, the alarming thing about the number of contracts are up, number of opportunities are up, but the supply base is down. I went to several conferences last year as we've come out of COVID, the National 8A Conference, Small Business Conference, and you have those OSDBUs sitting up there going, we're now required, President Biden signed it into the law, our goals are increasing every year. But where are you, right? So back to what Larry said about the barriers to business, they're real. We know it, right? Preaching to the choir, to the participants on the phone, right? The payment terms alone. The good news is it looks like they're going to, the final rule was issued that the payment terms will go from net 30 to net 15. Much better than corporate America, right? But to get to sam.gov, got to register in there, right? But you think military has their jargon and language, welcome to the FAR and all that, right? But the bottom line is that it is a must-have tool for your toolkit. And again, we'll talk about some other opportunities in the end, but if not, it will definitely impede your success in growing your business. Thanks.
And that beautifully articulated, and couldn't agree more with everything that you said. I'll start by answering the question that came through the chat. So that bullet point references the baseline of 125,000 businesses in 2010, where as of 2022, the number was at 71,000 firms. And so that is the most recent full year in terms of the number of contractors. So that was the most recent data that we could find in terms of 2022. But I mean, that's a significant decrease, right? You're 35, 40% or somewhere in that range of, a reduction in terms of the number of contractors that you have. So definitely a staggering number. And that, to your point about the cost of trying to, I guess you say, implement cybersecurity to pursue federal contracts and the cost associated with it. If we go back to this slide here, and this is the SMB cost for cybersecurity incidents, right? So it's between $826 all the way up to $653,000. And if you start getting into the large company enterprise level in governments, et cetera, I believe the average cost of a cybersecurity incident now is around $3.5 million. And so the likelihood is not guaranteed, but the likelihood is that even if you don't necessarily want to jump through the hoops to implement cybersecurity for a federal contract, you probably need to do it for the going concern of your business. Speaking from my accounting background, because the reality of it is they are targeting small businesses at a very high clip. Many of those businesses aren't prepared, and they're ultimately having to have a cash outlay associated with those breaches because of a cybersecurity breach that could have been mitigated. So just wanted to respond to those points, and that because they were such strong points.
And I also in speaking in defense of government, right?
That's a good thing. Yeah. Okay.
Where government, is very intentional and interested in increasing the number of small businesses that are federal contractors, they can't do it from a perspective where they let every small business get a contractor at the risking the vulnerability of that particular agency, right? It becomes very important to them to make sure, just by default, that the businesses that are winning contracts aren't creating a vulnerability for that particular agency, right? So they don't want to sacrifice, if government wouldn't want to sacrifice security as a means of the number of small businesses getting contracts. But at the same time, these are things that we're taught, the things that we're talking about today are making sure that you are able to present yourself as a differentiator in RFPs, or as a differentiator in going after bids for federal contracts, et cetera, that you are prepared with a certain level of cyber resiliency to be able to protect yourself, right? And I think the notion of, oh, well, if you have these things, you won't be breached, right? I don't think that's necessarily the question and or the outcome, right? It's more so, if I'm a government entity, or if I'm a U.S. corporation and I am offering an opportunity to be within my supply chain, I want to make sure that you have a certain level of cyber resiliency, that if something does happen, you have the way to remain operational, right? You have the ability to be able to communicate transparently with me in terms of what happened, or how they got in, and really what my vulnerability is as an agency or corporation who's offering you the opportunity to be within my supply chain. So I wanted to make sure I call that out, because the numbers are relatively staggering in terms of the reduction in firms, and it really supports the interest of government to increase that number and bring that number back up, but without sacrificing, again, the cyber posture of any agency or corporation, if you will.
All right. So Larry, there and Kendall, there is a question. If we hire a company to cover cybersecurity, is there federal fund that helps for the cost of that contract? Like it's an expense. So can the federal fund help with that?
I'm not. I think it's based on the deal type and the agency that you're working with. So I don't think there's actually one answer to that question. I think at a certain level of some of these certifications or attestations, they might be expenses that you have to incur. But at a certain level within certain agencies, you can actually include the cybersecurity requirements as a cost of the project. And so,
Yeah.
I hate to give an attorney's answer, but it depends.
No, that's absolutely right. We call it DOTS, right? Depends on the situation, right?
Yes.
So from a procurement perspective, I will add to that, is that make sure that you can articulate and document the cost of what you're doing for cybersecurity, right? As granular as possible, because your widget might cost A, but with the enhanced security, now all of it's gone up $1.50. But if I'm the buyer and I'm sitting there going, okay, because they always want, what is that, best price, low cost, whatever that jargon is. But if you can demonstrate to me why you are a little bit more expensive, but you bring to me peace of mind, that you can, to the best of your ability, right, avoid, that you're cognizant of cyber risk, and you're saying, I've invested in this, so it drives my cost up a little bit, and here's the spreadsheet that shows it, I'm going to go with you, right? Because you're addressing a major concern for me. And, they always say, you pay for what you get, right? So that, again, is being able to know your expense, your cost, and articulate it, how it ties in. I guess it would maybe be called an indirect expense, right? Maybe a direct expense. Again, it depends on what your commodity is, right? To be able to tie that to your cost of goods and services so that you can recoup that from your customer.
Absolutely. I appreciate the support there as a true procurement professional. Jumping into the next slide here, because I'm sure a lot of people want to hear about what the notable cyber regulations are for federal contractors. We put the first one at the top here in terms of FISMA, just to give business owners perspective on what the government has actually done to sort of modernize some of their InfoSec policies. And so if you wanted to go look up what the government sort of mandates of itself, you can have access to that also. But from a simple federal acquisition perspective, we have the FAR 52.204-21, which is basically your basic safeguarding of information systems. And then from a DoD perspective, it's the same thing, but a different clause. And then you have NIST 800-171, which is essentially the DoD's NIST framework for doing federal contracts with them. I call those out in sort of passing because essentially what's happened is those frameworks are now being incorporated. The key elements of them are being incorporated into CMMC 2.0. Which we'll explain what CMMC really means in subsequent slides here. But again, CMMC serves as an extension for the DFARS, which is the DoD Federal Acquisition Regulation, but also the NIST 800-171 and being able to safeguard covered information systems. And so CMMC is really, if you're pursuing a federal contract, one, again, you need to look at the contract and see which level of CMMC you need to achieve, but that's likely where you'll start from a certification or validation perspective in terms of attesting that your information security systems are secure enough to protect the data that's going to be generated in your engagement with the government. So with that, what is the CMMC? Simply an acronym for Capability Maturity Model Certification. And it's really a comprehensive set of guidelines to help organizations establish and improve their processes-based practices. It used to be at 1.0 and then went through some iterations. I believe it got up to 1.3. But CMMC used to be at 5 levels. And as you can see here, from a model perspective, there were 17 practices that went all the way up to 171 practices. And the assessment itself had to be done by third parties, essentially, right? And so the improvement moving into CMMC 2.0 model is one, there are less practices at the higher level. And for those on the call who aren't technical or into cybersecurity, a practice is essentially a control or a requirement, right? It's a simple question or recommendation as to how you should be governing your information systems or deploying technology or training your people or things along those lines. So when you see practices, just think of them as business requirements from a cybersecurity perspective of your company. And so, transitioning over to the right side of the page here, where you see the 3 levels, one of the things that we found very encouraging, right, going back to your point, Annette, and the points that Larry's raised is the government has to figure out a way to get more small businesses involved in federal contracting, and making the security barrier a lower barrier to get over, but maintain the integrity of that barrier, I think is a key way to do it. And they've done it beautifully here. One, from a level 1 perspective, they've made the 17 practices or requirements very simple, and we'll show you what those are in subsequent slides. But with this, you're able to actually do a self-assessment on an annual basis now. And so there's not an additional cost per se of hiring a third party to do a comprehensive assessment. You can essentially take the requirements yourself and look at them. However, with that, you still may want some outside eyes to make sure you're doing things correctly before you pursue that multi-million-dollar contract. And so they have made it simpler from that perspective. Level 2, they've essentially said that there will be 110 of those practices that are aligned with the NIST 800-171, which is for the defense contractors. But level 2 is nuanced in that the party that does the assessment is dependent upon the type of data that's generated within the contract, and whether that's CUI or FCI, which we'll get into in the next slide, because I know people hate the alphabet soup, if you will. So I'll explain more what that means. But then level 3 is obviously, what you'd expect it to be, right? For the most sensitive projects, you have to go through the most requirements. And so that's actually a government-led assessment, which is understandable as well, to ensure that you have the proper protocols in place. So from a 30,000-foot CMMC introduction perspective, I hope this helps explain what the framework looks like overall. And then we'll show you all some more slides here on sort of some of the detail of it. Going into the FCI piece and the CUI piece. FCI is federal contractor information, and to keep it simple, is information that is not marked for public release, but it is subject to the minimum security requirements of the CMMC level 1. And so I'll give you some examples of what FCI could be. Contract performance reports, organizational or programmatic charts, process documentation, proposal responses, past performance information, contract information, things of that nature, right? Where it's not something that you should be putting on LinkedIn or Facebook or, letting the world know what it is, but it's not necessarily, critical information, if you will. CUI gets to be a lot more serious as it relates to the nature of the data that's being protected. It does require safeguarding or dissemination controls, but is not considered classified. And so it's sort of that middle tier of information that could actually have cause real detriment to an organization, but it's not yet classified information. And so CUI must be legally protected, but is not deemed sensitive enough to require a high level of security clearance access. And so things that might be considered CUI are things like health documents, technical drawings, blueprints, any IP that might be associated with a potential project, whether that IP is coming from the government side or from the contractor side that's created an architecture for the government. Those are some examples of FCI versus CUI. And we give those examples because you as a small business have to understand what type of data is going to be generated as a result of the project that you're pursuing. And as you can see on the chart here, if you're pursuing a project that only deals with FCI, then you're fine with the level 1 certification, and which you can do via self-assessment, and you can do it each year. If you move up to level 2, the CUI can be nuanced in that for non-prioritized acquisitions with data not critical to national security, you can actually do a self-assessment for level 2 as well. But if you have data that's critical to national security, then you need a third-party assessment. And that C3 PAOS is certified third-party approved organizations that can actually do the assessments. And so we wanted to give you all this slide so that you can see that the level that you need to pursue as an organization is dependent upon the type of data being generated in the project that you're pursuing. And we at Cyber Alliance, if we were fortunate enough to work with you all on projects like that, will help you make the distinction between what type of data you are going to be generated and what level of CMMC you might need to pursue.
So Kendra, there's a question.
Yes.
From Carmen. Can someone recap the examples of FCI and CUI? Examples.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. So FCI are contract performance reports, or just contract reports, organizational or programmatic charts, process documentation, proposal responses, past performance information, whether it be operational or financial, contract information, and those are all examples of FCI. From a CUI perspective, we mentioned like health information, technical drawings, blueprints, architectures, or intellectual property associated with the government or the project that the government is conducting. So those are the examples of the two different buckets there.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So with the CMMC domains, again, so if we're mindful of the fact that many times we're not talking to security professionals, so I'll help explain what domains are. Domains are high-level security categories, essentially. And so, if you wanted to say different domains of education, one might be math, but then a capability might be algebra, and then a requirement might be, doing quadratic formulas or something along those lines. But just to draw an analogy between what a domain is, which is sort of the top level, a control or requirement will be the next level down. And then you'll be able to sort of understand what you need to do from there. But we show these 17 security domains because those 110 plus controls or requirements that are required at level 3, I'll go back here real fast. So these 110 plus practices, or these 17 practices, come from these 17 security domains. And so we highlight these because it really just gives you a sense of the types of expertise or business functionality you'll need to incorporate within your business, again, depending on the type of contract that you're pursuing. But very intuitive domains, if I may. And I know I'm probably a little biased given that I've spent time in cybersecurity. But when you actually sit down and read the controls, they make sense from the perspective of business operations, right? And I'll show you in the next slide here. But wanted to give the audience a sense of what the domains look like at a very high level, and then also give a sense of what CMMC looks like at level 1. And so we talked about the 17 controls that need to be completed in order to consider yourself CMMC level 1. They go, from a domain perspective, it doesn't cover all 17 domains, it's just 17 controls. Again, domain is the top level, controls are more of what you're supposed to be doing in practice. And so here you actually only see 5 of the domains represented: access control, identification and authentication, media protection, physical protection, and system and information integrity. I won't read through each of the controls here, but what I will say is this. One of the things that sort of intrigued me about cybersecurity was identity and access management. And you find that here on the left-hand side in these first 2 columns. But identity and access management really, I was taught is sort of like the reporter of a crime when a security incident happens, because it allows you to create user profiles of the people within your organization, or the customers and partners that do business within your organization. And so everybody has a profile. With that, you have either role-based access control or attribute-based access control. We'll stick with role-based just for the sake of this conversation, but role-based access control for a user of your network says, hey, we just hired an accountant named Sarah. She should only have access to systems A, B, and C, and she can only get into the building at this time. And if you have that type of access control across each of the users within your organization, and again, this should be done in a small business. I know it can be, crazy with the day-to-day, but even if you only have 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 people shouldn't have access to everything. And so even if you just start segmenting duties and access at a very high level, that's still access management and access control. And then once you have that role-based access, making sure that there are authentication requirements for those people to access the different systems within your environment, whether it be your accounting systems or your Salesforce or whatever it may be, right? But ensuring that they have to actually provide credentials and a password to be able to log in to do their jobs, because then you're sort of putting protections around data that's pretty critical to your organization. And that's what the CMC is driving at here, is a basic understanding of, are you doing these foundational things to secure your business before we tie you into, to Larry's point earlier, before we tie you into the federal government supply chain or value chain, we understand you aren't presenting undue risk that could be easily mitigated. You notice I never say the risk is resolved, because to Larry's point, nobody can ever guarantee that you won't get breached. It's like saying if you have a gun, you won't ever get shot. It's just not a reality, and anybody that tells you otherwise is not being truthful with you. But wanted to show this slide of how the 17 controls look at an implementation level. And again, we're happy to speak with anyone on the call about walking them through this exercise and helping them understand where they are. How can we help immediately? Our high level offerings are, things that people typically that resonate with people we speak with. The fractional information security officer, managed services, CMMI assessment, and being able to walk customers through that exercise. An overall security gap assessment, providing foundational documents like architectures or policies or things of that nature, we do well. On request, access to security expertise, pen testing, vulnerability scanning, and incident response. But that's 30,000 foot, right? What we do want to share with the audience is our key offering, which is the Cyber Trust Score, which answers the question at the bottom here of how do we actually help you decide what you need. So with that, I'll pass the ball to Larry to talk through what the Trust Score is and how we can actually use it to help the business owners on the call here determine what their needs are.
Thank you, Kendra. And that was a lot of great information you just shared, and a lot to unpack. But in terms of our business model, probably the easiest kind of identify or recognizable business model would be Credit Karma, right? As Social Security numbers from a personal credit worthiness perspective are leveraged to be able to determine your ability to get car loans or insurance or home insurance or mortgages or auto loans and things of that nature. Whereas you supply your credit score, and then based on that credit score, you receive recommendations of what's available to you based on your level of credit worthiness. Our model of cybersecurity with our Cyber Trust Score is very similar in that. Our Trust Score is a cyber risk assessment that is digitally completed and digitally deployed. It is, in terms of its comparison to other kind of auditing functions or processes, it is a means of you as the entrepreneur has the ability to go through a series of questions that will give you a viewpoint of your high to low cyber risk, and then make recommendations for you for being able to address any of those vulnerabilities at the contextualized way of what's most important to you, where you should spend your investments, right? There's nothing that we want to do. There's nothing worse than taking a risk assessment and A, not knowing what you should do after you receive the results, or B, being directed to make investments in areas that aren't necessarily associated with your highest level of risk, your risk profile, or things that, again, in terms of prioritizing how you move forward, what you really should be doing, right? And what's most important to your business. And so at the end of taking our Cyber Trust Score, it's something that we took, our team probably from piloting the Trust Score, we've spent kind of years of contextualizing the questions so that you don't actually have to be a cybersecurity expert or a technology expert to even answer the questions, which was very, very important to us and very much aligned with our mission to make cybersecurity knowledge and cybersecurity solutions inclusive and accessible and affordable for that matter. And this particular slide here kind of gives you somewhat of a snapshot of the recommendations and or services that will be available to you based on your results of going through the cyber risk assessment, whether it's third-party security intelligence, whether it is endpoint management. I think some of us in this world of connectivity probably don't even realize how many endpoints we actually have, whether they be traditional endpoints or untraditional endpoints, like our phone or our laptop, our car, our smart car, our smart watch, even our refrigerator, right, are connected to the internet now. So we have such, as business people and as just consumers, we have so many endpoints at this point where we need to have some level of awareness and coverage. The training and staffing aspect, or the managed security services, which we also have filtered into what we call our cybersecurity marketplace. Our cybersecurity marketplace is completely aligned to the respective questions and their level of high and low risk. So if you think about our engagement model, when someone takes the trust score, it takes, like I said, anyone from an hour to maybe an hour and a half typically to get through the trust score. Many of the questions are yes or no. Some of them have to be validated, but it doesn't take very long to get through the trust score. Once you're evaluated, again, you'll be briefed on what your high, medium, and low risks are. And then that is actually mapped to solutions that are within our marketplace, where we are providing kind of best in breed technology solutions from many of the large technology companies that you see here. But we also have smaller companies that are within our marketplace as well that provide very customized solutions and solutions that can be contextualized to small businesses. And we recommend someone doing the trust score as shown in the last box in this flow model, at least every 6 months, right? Because as technologies are changing, regulations are changing, your security posture is also going to change. Your risk model is also going to change, whether or not you're going into new markets, whether or not you're exporting and going into new geographies. You want to be able to understand what your threats are, what your own cybersecurity posture is. And this method and flow model that we have really is about understanding what your current cyber posture is and improving your cyber health, right, along this continuum. So if there's any additional color Kendra wants to add to this, by all means, Kendra, you can add on these slides if I missed anything.
Yeah, no, I think you articulated it beautifully. The only thing I'll add to what you said is going back to the CMMC piece. Our controls are our questions that are within the Cyber Trust Score, very similar to how the government created CMMC, pulling key requirements from the FAR regulation and DFAR and NIST 800-171. We created the Cyber Trust Score in the very same vein. In addition to those regulations, we actually pull questions and controls from ISO 27001, NIST 800-53, and GDPR as well, right? GDPR, CCPA, the POPI Act for those who are familiar with South Africa. But we wanted to ensure that we not only had a cybersecurity element of the trust score, but also a data privacy element to the trust score, because data privacy is so important in today's business landscape. And so I wanted to make sure that context was understood as it relates to you taking the time to do the Cyber Trust Score, because as a part of that exercise, we can pull out the 17 controls that are required for CMMC level 1 to let you know how you performed against those, but then also some of the other frameworks as well as it relates to your security posture and the type of business that you're trying to pursue. So just wanted to add that piece of color. And I know we've been talking for a while now, so we'll get to the Q&A with the last 10 minutes here and see what questions you all may have.
All right. I don't see any additional questions in the chat. And so let's take a few minutes to go ahead and open the floor up if anyone wants to unmute and ask any questions at this time. But thank you so much for that valuable information. It is a lot to cover, a lot to take in, but certainly businesses are getting what they need in order to do some planning and strategy development to continue to move forward in this whole risk area.
Hey, Sharon,
Thank you.
you
Yes.
well, first of all, thank you. And again, thanks to the team for the platform. But you just said something that I think is required for us to repeat. We know that's a lot of information, right? Like, we talk to technology people on a daily basis, and they're like, man, that's a lot. And so we don't want anybody on the call to be intimidated. There are folks like us that exist to try to simplify it in a way that's tailored to the needs of your business and your operation, right? So by no means do we expect people to walk away from this and be cybersecurity or CMMC experts, but would love to engage with whoever wants to take the next step. So I just wanted to be clear on that part, that it was a lot of information. We structured it as such, but wanted to make sure we covered the risk management element of cybersecurity, but also the business enablement facets of it as well.
Wonderful.
So while we're waiting for the questions, let me just make a few comments if you want. So excellent presentation. Every time I hear this stuff, I learn a little bit more, and it still hurts my head. So I'm glad you guys know what you're talking about. But I did want to point out to the businesses on here, with any new requirement, there comes people, and comes fraud, comes people willing to sell you anything, right? And we talked about this when we first met. The requirements weren't even finalized, and they were popping up on the internet, companies saying, pay us $5,000 and we'll make sure you are CMMC 3 qualified, right? And so what I would say to you is, let the buyer beware. There are always people, and I'm not saying don't ever pay for a service. Okay. You have to count the cost. Just like there's always free resources, and then there's fee-based resources, right? You can pay someone to do all your 8A paperwork, right? You can pay someone to help you get certified. But again, that's a cost. And for a lot of businesses in the startup or in that young one, every dollar counts, right? So I'm just saying, make sure that you do your due diligence, and there usually are free resources. Might take a little bit longer, might take a little bit more elbow grease, but make sure you do your due diligence and check to see what free resources are available. Okay, that was the earlier question too, is can it cover the funding? So under Catherine's leadership and Shay, we've been talking about what other resources and education we can bring. Is there something that we can do to help you give more tools in your toolkit? And this is definitely one area we're going to continue to look at, is how can we, as the North Carolina MBDA, support, fund, sponsor something that are going to help businesses get into sam.gov, get that cybersecurity assessment, get those kinds of things. So stay tuned, because we are committed to helping you grow your business, not just with the state procurement opportunities, but with federal too. Okay, a lot of times there's synergy there. So thanks.
All right, great. And just another quick note too on that question about whether there were funds available to help cover the cost of cybersecurity. So when it comes to federal funding, most of that really is going directly to the government. However, continue to stay posted about any kind of grant opportunities that may be coming. So if you think, for example, about the Retool NC grant, that would have been something that you could have used to help cover that cost, because there was a clause in for what you could use the funds for. It was pretty broad. And so there may be some grant opportunities out there. I don't specifically know of any. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. And one thing I can assure you, though, is that any things that we find out about in terms of funding and or grant opportunities, we will certainly pass that information along to you. And so I'm sure that you're on the list either because you're a client of the center, a hub firm, or one of our resource partners, and we are always more than happy to share the information that comes our way. As at this point. Okay, let's see. I see one other that popped up here. Okay, so question here. Chris Magu, thanks for your presentation in cybersecurity. It's aligned with my company's CMMC program 2.0 initiative. Uh-oh, it's scrolling here. I'm a small business owner in IT compliance for the past 20 years. What are some of the certifications needed to be a CMMC professional? And also, do you have subcontracting opportunities available?
Chris, great question. I'm actually going to send you my email, and this is for the entire group here. Alliance.com, because we'd love to talk to you about both of those topics in more than 3.5 minutes to ensure that we can actually dive into it. As you can see, we can be quite loquacious, so feel free to shoot us an email and we'll make sure we chat about those items.
And yes, we as a company, we do have, I don't want to call them subcontracting opportunities as much as I will refer to them as channel partners, right? So if you think back to the slide where we were going through the engagement model and we had the box there with IBM and Verizon, etc. As mentioned, we do have small businesses that are within our marketplace of solutions. So if you are a technology company and you have a solution, please reach out to Kendra and I, as we would love to talk to you about our channel partner program and how we might be able to work with you to be able to provide your solutions to individuals who are going through our cyber trust score process, and businesses that we know that are looking for services. This is an ecosystem approach, and as we mentioned in the beginning of our presentation, there isn't one company that has all of the solutions, has all the answers, and is solving all of the problems. This is something that's a big problem, an everybody problem, and it's going to take all of us working in the private sector and the public sector working together to be able to create a certain level of cyber resiliency. So by all means, reach out to us, and we'd love to have discussions with you how we can work together.
All right. Well, thanks again so very much to you, Cyber Alliance, for joining us on today. I mean, the stats, of course, are amazing when it comes to breaches and the impact that it has on small businesses. And so we appreciate the information that you've shared to help build resilience within the businesses, to help them mitigate risk, and to continue to ensure business continuity. So thank you so very much, Larry and Kendra. Thank you, Annette, for pulling this session together for us. Thank you to Angela Sellers and Derek Harris for all the background work that they're doing. Thank you to all the firms that have joined us on today to learn about this information, and also to our resource partners. Thank you also to the rest of the MBDA team and to the Hub Office and our NCSBE team for all that you do to support the work that we do on behalf of our business community in the respective areas of your responsibility. So thanks again so very much. Don't forget to fill out that survey for us, and do have a great rest of the day.